Let's delve deep into Dune Part 2. The fight for the spice continues. Just a quick summary of my thoughts on Dune Part 2. I thought it was a masterpiece, one of the best films I've ever seen, and I thought it had amazing direction, astonishing visuals, terrific dialogue, and unbelievable performances. This movie starts off with House Corino and Lady Irulan, who narrates this film, and she sort of tells the audience that her father regrets the attack on House Atreides and that they've never been the same since. I just love the introduction, and I love the addition of Florence Pugh and Christopher Walken in this film. I thought both actors were just terrific in their respective roles, and they just added so much to the overall lore of Dune. We go right into an action scene, which already this movie is just more as action-packed than the first Dune. Paul, his mother, and the Freemen attack the Harkonnens, ambushing them. So both parties are just attacking each other. The Harkonnens sort of realize that they're being ambushed, and they're getting hit off one by one. And it's great just seeing the bodies fall from the cliff as Paul and his mother are just hiding underneath. They just see all the bodies just thumping on the ground, and immediately with this action scene, we sort of understand and we get the feeling that this movie is gonna be even darker than the first one. It's gonna be even more violent than it was, and this movie is extremely violent. It's very brutal. There are some scenes that are almost hard to watch. I probably wouldn't bring a child under like 10 to see this movie because of how intense it actually is. The Freemen are victorious and they head back to the camp. Now, some of the Freemen really don't believe that Paul is actually the Messiah. They think that he's a fraud, and of course some of them are upset that he killed Jameis, even though it was fair combat and he had no choice. And I really want to comment on Javier Bardem in this film, which I did not in my spoiler-free review because I thought he was terrific here. He adds a little levity to the film. He just is always like the optimist. He believes in Paul, and he wants Paul to lead the Freemen to freedom. Paul must complete a series of tasks in order to prove his worth to the Freemen. He tells them early on that, I'm not really a messiah, I just want to learn your ways, but that's of course just to get them on his side. I thought that all the tests were interesting. I really liked see him trek through the desert in order to prove that he was a messiah, just to travel the desert and stay alive. And that's how his relationship with Shami blossoms. Shami shows him how to make a shelter, and together they sort of develop this chemistry and they fall in love. He also needs to ride one of the sandstorms, which I thought was one of the best scenes in this movie. I love just everything about that sequence. Paul manages to ride one of the biggest sandworms that the Freemen have ever seen, and of course, like, they're dubious when he's about to get on top of one. They say, like, "Don't embarrass us." I thought that was a funny moment in the film, and he manages to just ride one gloriously, and all the Freemen, they just really applaud him, and it's really an awesome scene. It's a terrific moment in the film, and it just proves how Paul is just super confident in his Messiah role, Just because of his visions that he's had, he knows that he's gonna succeed. Just because of his visions that he's had, knows that he's gonna succeed and become a leader for these people. And also, how does one get off a sandworm though? It feels like incredibly dangerous, maybe even more dangerous than getting on one. The Freemen do a lot of damage to the Harkonnens in this film. They try to damage them in any way that they can. I really want to touch on the romance between Paul and Shammy because I really think it's wonderful here. The dialogue between them is touching, it's sweet. It's complete opposite of like the romance of Twilight or like 50 Shades of Grey, which are just terrible romances, but here it's actually really nice. You care about both of them. Like it's really well done. Denis Villeneuve mentioned in an interview that he hates writing dialogue, and I really don't understand why, because the dialogue in this film is just brilliant. It's really well done. There's some exposition, but not too much. There's just a fine line, and I feel like every scene mattered, every dialogue, every conversation was important to further the story along. Lady Jessica became sort of unlikable here in this film, which is sort of the point. She was more likable to me in the first one, even though she wasn't really Mother of the Year. But I felt like her character really descended sort of into this just terrible figure that really wants power. She just wants power. That and Paul becomes power hungry as well as the movie goes on. But Lady Jessica becomes the first one to really realizes what power can do. She's part of this cult, and she drinks the water of life, which is just sort of poison. And of course, the other Freeman woman, they don't know that Jessica is actually pregnant. That's something only Paul and Jessica knows, and they realize that they made this sort of mistake. And now Jessica can have spiritual conversations with her unborn child, which is really weird. It's a really weird thought. Like it feels almost like the Force in some way in Star Wars. It just feels like something like a Jedi would be able to do. But imagine that, having like conversations with the child that hasn't been born yet. That would be really weird. It would be super strange. And the unborn child is actually played she's played by Anya Taylor-Joy, which is an actress I really enjoy. The future visions that Paul has, I really like her as an actress, and maybe we're gonna get more of Anya in probably in part 4. I was gonna say part 3, but she's probably gonna be more in Children of Dune if they do make that movie one day. Lady Jessica heads to the southern tribes while Paul decides to stay behind in the northern tribes because he feels that if he goes to the northern tribes, he fears that a holy war will ignite, and he is more comfortable in staying in the northern tribes. And Lady Jessica, she departs on a sandworm, leaving Paul behind. And Lady Jessica also discovers how they make this poison, this water of life. They need to capture a young sandworm, and they drown it, and they need to extract the poison out of the sandworm. And I thought that whole sequence was really well executed too. It's just a fascinating addition to the lore. The lore of Dune is really fascinating in my opinion. It's really great stuff. I love it here that we get a lot more times with the Harkonnens, but this is where this movie, like the brutality and the violence, really escalates more than the first one. I thought this movie was way more violent than the first Dune, which is alright. It might alienate some people that really can't stomach violence, but I thought that all the violence was really important to the plot because it showed how violent and brutal the Harkonnen species were, and how intense um, and Austin Butler's character Fred Ruta was, and also just Dave Bautista, who just execute someone just because he just suggested that he should rest. It's like, are you kidding me? You're just gonna kill someone because he said, "Oh, you should rest." That's just intense. The Both characters are intense. I think Fred Ruta is even more violent than Dave Bautista is, and you sort of see how like just killing for them is just for fun. It's for pleasure. They get so much joy out of it. And so, during the entire black and white sequence, it's Fred Ruta's birthday, and he ends up killing remaining House Atreides survivors. And I thought that this entire sequence was really well directed. It's even hard to watch at times because of how brutal it is, but it's also reminding me of Gladiator, the moments in the Gladiator, and I thought it was really well done. Um, Now, Fred Ruta, he manages to kill everyone, all of the House Atreides survivors. He kills all of them, but he says to Baron Vladimir that he knows that the Baron tried to kill him because I think that the soldiers weren't drugged beforehand. So he tells the Baron that you tried to kill me, and I should just end you for your betrayal. But then Vladimir promises Fred Ruta the rule of Arrakis, which I feel like Vladimir is sort of like the Emperor. He gives out false promises to his followers. He really is sort of the Emperor, but instead of just being like old and wrinkly and skinny, he's just this fat, disgusting being that you never really want to come across. He's just a vile, disgusting person. And yeah, like I said, Austin Butler is great in this film. Dave Bautista is wonderful as well. Stellan Skarsgård is always one of my favorite performers. He's just terrific. It's a funny scene when Fred Ruta tries to make Dave Bautista kiss his shoes. Like, you should just tell Dave Bautista doesn't want to, but he does it anyway because he has no choice. Like, everything is just power play here for the House Harkonnen. They just want to rule, and they feel like the Sith in some way in Star Wars, because the Sith were the same. They just didn't trust each other, and they would just execute one another, just for a very very little reason, just because they felt like it. In Gladiator sequence, Fred Ruta is followed by Lady Margot, who's played here by Leah Seydoux. She wants to know how he can be controlled. This entire sequence where she leads him to her room is really sinister, and it's really also seductive. It's quite like it's sexy, but at the same time you just don't really know what's gonna happen. And then Lady Margot, she gives him the box, and she has the dart next to his neck, and she wants him to do the same test Paul did for the pain. And of course, it's something that he passes because this character isn't afraid of pain. He will just endure any pain he gets. He relinquishes from it. Paul also encounters Josh Brolin's character, Gurney Halleck, in the desert. They think that they're the Harkonnens, and the Freemen start attacking them. But Paul, he realizes that it's one of his own, and the two embrace. And I thought that it was a nice, touching moment, and I really think that Josh Brolin is fantastic here in this film. He really supports Paul. He wants revenge on the Harkonnens as well. I love his outbursts while they're walking. Shami just wants them shut up, and he's like, "You got 200 men? Do you realize the damage that you could accomplish?" And I thought that he is just fantastic here in this film. Josh Brolin is always great as an actor, and I really liked his role. Later on in the film, Shami becomes upset with Paul because Paul actually drinks the water of life himself. And he doesn't die, but he just sort of drifts into a coma. And he sees the future. He sees his future sister, which is well, like I said, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, and he discovers that his mother is the daughter of Baron Harkonnen. Of course, Lady Jiska didn't know. She says she didn't know. I believe her, and it's a terrible truth for Paul to hear because he learned that he's part Harkonnen, and later on he actually declares like it's better to fight like a Harkonnen so that they can survive and thrive. The climax of this film is really fantastic. It's one of my favorite parts of the film for sure. Paul eventually becomes the Messiah, and he accepts his role. He really becomes this ruthless ruler, and he just challenges everyone who questions him. Like, he uses the voice, and he's menacing. Timothée Chalamet's performance here is Oscar worthy. It really is. It's an amazing performance. He's so great in the role. And he also alienates Shami in the process, which I understand. Like, if you sort of realize that your partner is losing his mind and he becomes so power hungry, you probably wouldn't stay with your partner. And she really becomes fearful for Paul, and I really understand how she feels. Paul challenges the Emperor, who arrives on Arrakis with Urulan and Shaddam 4. The Freemen, they ride on sandworms, which is a great plan, and they attack the Harkonnens. The Harkonnens can't really do anything, and sandworms, like, they eat everything in their passage, so they just attack the Harkonnens and the Sadokors. And Paul arrives in the throne room with the Freemen. Just before his arrival, Shaddam 4, he sort of he doesn't kill Baron, but he attacks him. He destroys the machinery that was sort of like keeping him alive. And so, like, Baron is weakened. He tries to get up the throne. And, like, I just love that nobody cares. Nobody's helping him. Nobody cares about Baron. And Paul arrives. He walks directly towards the Baron, and he just stabs him in the neck. He finally gets revenge. Paul also wants to murder Shaddam 4, but Fred Rutha, he wants Paul to fight him in a single combat. So the two of them, they go at it, and it's a very brutal fight. It lasts probably like 2 minutes, and Paul gets stabbed twice, but he finally managed to get the upper hand and kills Fred Rutha. He kills him, and he wins here. The House Atreides, they win the battle, they win the throne, kind of like in Game of Thrones. They win the final battle. And he asks Irana for her hand, which is completely a power-hungry move. He didn't need to do that. He didn't need to ask her for her hand in marriage, but he does it anyway. Of course, Shami now completely hates him. She doesn't recognize the Paul she fell in love with. And Irana, she tells Paul to let her father live, and she will marry him. And so Paul then tells the Freemen that he will lead them to paradise. All of them except Shami, they follow him. The spaceships above them, they refuse to accept Paul as their new leader. And I'm sure that not everyone will accept his role as the Messiah. And if you know what happens in the next installment, you sort of know where it's gonna go. So, and we end with Shami, who is really angered, and she prepares herself to ride a sandworm. And the last shot is of her face. I thought that this movie was just a masterpiece, like I said. It's so well shot, so well directed. It's extremely well acted. I'm really excited to see part three, which is like the second book, Dune Messiah. It's gonna be nominated for Best Picture, and it might even win. I don't know if we're gonna get better movies than this film throughout the year. It's still early. It's still really early, but Dune 2 is just the perfect film in my opinion. It's really great stuff, really amazing science fiction. And yeah, I'm really excited to watch part 3. So I know that there's a few changes here and there from the book, but it's an adaptation, so you kind of have to accept that there's going to be changes. The book is the book and the film is the film, and they're not the same. Two completely different things. But the most of the reaction of this movie I've seen is really positive. Online, of course, people are gonna bitch. There are always people that are gonna complain about everything, but I feel like this movie is gonna have a really strong reception and do really well at the box office. So yeah, just that's it. That's a spoiler review. Let me know what you thought about Dune in the comments below. See you next time.